It is day 32 of the shutdown, and there is still no resolution in sight as Congress prepares to pursue two dueling bills to reopen the government this week. As of midday yesterday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi had not spoken to the president or anyone from the White House about Trump's latest proposal that would give temporary protections to DACA recipients and immigrants from the temporary protected status list in exchange for a border wall. Instead, the House is expected to pass a series of spending bills that would reopen parts of the government that have nothing to do with the wall, while the Senate takes up the proposal announced by President Trump. The Washington Post spoke with more than 40 Republican senators and aides over the past week, many of whom are standing behind Trump's demand for a border wall funding, even as their party bears the brunt of the blame for the shutdown standoff. Republican Senator Todd Young, the chairman of the Senate GOP campaign arm for 2020, told the Post, quote, "I'm not contemplating anything that the president hasn't indicated he would sign."
Meanwhile, stock markets around the world are under pressure once again this morning over renewed concerns about the strength of the global economy. Those concerns were exacerbated yesterday when China posted that its economy grew 6.6% in 2018. That'd be a good figure for most countries, but it marks the slowest reading for China since 1990. The U.S. also has added to the uncertainty with the ongoing trade wars and government shutdown. A number of economists have already warned that the shutdown has cut this country's growth. And U.S. consumers, who have remained strong for months, appear to be shaken by increasing warning signs about the economy. The latest consumer confidence reading fell to the lowest level of Donald Trump's presidency. Meanwhile, ahead of the annual World Economic Forum in Davos, the International Monetary Fund downgraded its expectation for the global economy, warning that the risks of a major slowdown have increased. Separately, PricewaterhouseCoopers released a survey showing 37% of business leaders are optimistic about the country. That fell from 63% last year. So here we are, Jim Vandehei. We have all these pressures around the world and here at home. Of course, we're into our second month now. We've been talking about it in terms of days and weeks. We're into our second month of the government shutdown right now, with the prospect of federal workers losing a second check coming up at the end of the week. But, man, it doesn't look to me like there's any movement or even any talk in Congress, any negotiation over President Trump's latest proposal.
In 25 years of watching this stuff, I've never seen an impasse like this where both sides feel so self-certain and then can point to data showing that their party wants them to continue the stance that they have. So there's not an obvious middle ground. I think Republicans, if anything, feel more dug in today than they did 4 days ago because they think the president's speech allows them to go out and say, listen, we're trying to propose a compromise that takes care of immigration in a more comprehensive way. Nancy Pelosi says it's not a non-starter. Most Democrats say it's a non-starter. As Jonathan Swan pointed out over the weekend, there's not a single Democrat that's come out and said, I like the Trump compromise. So we're no closer today than we were 30 days ago. The president has said privately this could go on a year. I don't think it would go on a year, but at this point, who the hell knows? Because there's not any sign that there's a middle ground.
Gene, it's striking that this shutdown, the longest in history, is surrounded by rhetoric on both sides, as Jim Vandehei just pointed out. Democrats feeling confident in their position, Republicans feeling increasingly confident because of the president's televised appearance Saturday afternoon. And yet overhanging this is a level of almost indifference among elected officials that even someone as jaded as I am finds absolutely shocking. Shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. There's this fight going on, and as you and Jim Vandehei pointed out, both Republicans and Democrats, for their own good reasons, are more dug in than ever, apparently. Yet there's a shutdown going on. There's real impact on real people. Some of them my neighbors here in the Washington area, but not just in Washington, in places like Alaska, where there's a large percentage of federal workers, and Montana, and places like that. Across the country, this is having an impact. It's not just federal workers, it's contractors as well, people who work on contract or work for firms that work on contracts with the federal government who are having the economic impact. I don't see how this gets resolved until the broader public feels more of a direct impact impact, and that can happen, for example, in air travel. There are a lot of TSA agents who are not going to be able to continue to work without pay for that much longer. They're just not going to be able. They don't make that much money. They have to put food on the table, and in an economy that it's basically at full employment, they're going to have to go out and look for other jobs. The air traffic controllers, they make more money, but they keep direct the pilots in the sky. There can be lots of disruption in something like air travel that could concentrate the minds of our elected representatives and maybe get this thing ended.
Willie, that might be the key to ending this thing. Once these elected senators and representatives try to come back to Washington this week to try to resolve this, and they're told at the airport while they're standing in very long lines because TSA people aren't getting paid, that the air traffic controllers are on, that they didn't show up from work. You're going to get on the plane?
Think about what we're saying here. It's going to take that to convince them to break this. You know, what Republicans have said, Susan, now if you go down the line, really, that's what seems to be the talking point, is that, look, the president's not going to sign it. He's not. So why are we even negotiating this? Anything that doesn't have the border wall, anything that doesn't have the $5.7 billion, he's not going to sign it, so we're not even going to talk about it. On the other hand, Democrats are saying we can't set this precedent that when the president wants something that he promised his cheering crowds during the campaign, he's going to shut down the government and hold us hostage. How do you see a way out of this?
Well, it seems right now the only potential off-ramp is the negotiation between Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi. I think that Donald Trump has thrown it there as the coverage becomes worse and worse. Let's not forget this is the cable TV president. He wants to see stories about himself in a positive light. These stories are devastating. People cannot afford to go to work because they can't afford childcare or gas in their car. These stories are going to keep coming out, like that poor woman who can't afford her therapy for cancer. And somewhere, while Donald Trump may not have any empathy and just simply doesn't care about people that he's elected to represent, hopefully Mitch McConnell can kind of dig deep and remember that this is about public service, because I think the only pressure point there is he starts worrying about certain members of his conference, Republicans who are up for re-election in 2020, and he starts worrying about defending them and moves the deal forward. Of course, he risks at that point Donald Trump's ear at him, but I think it's worth it.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.